Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. My name is Rachel and I am the Marketing Manager for Asia here at Acquia. Today's presentation is called, What is the Digital Experience Maturity Model? Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. If you have any questions for us, we are saving time at the end. So please be sure to use the Q&A and chat windows to submit your questions and we'll bring them up at the end. This presentation is being recorded and we will share it with you at the end of the session. We have with us today, Tony Peters, our pre-sales lead for Acquia Asia. Without further ado, I will pass it over to Tony. All right, Tony, take it away.
Hey, thanks a lot, Rachel. So yeah, as Rachel said, we're going to talk about our digital experience maturity model. This is the first in a 4-part series. I'll shortly go through those other parts and what they're going to bring to you today. But today we're really going to talk about the ebook that we have. I'll give you an introduction to that. I'm not just going to read through the ebook. I'll give you a link to it afterwards where you can download it and digest it. But what I'm going to go through today is things like the pain points in terms of that digital experience, and then really how to get started in terms of that digital maturity, how it can be relevant for your business, and then I can then go through in more depth about what we're going to see on the next webinar sessions. So as I said, this is the first in a 4-parter. This one's going to be really an overview about getting started and what it all means. The next one, the next session after that, is going to be talking about your voice, talking about the content that you're going to be putting forward, using that high-value CMS and personalization within that. Focusing pretty much on one channel at the beginning, but really getting the best out of those tools. The next one, session 3, is going to be talking about conversations and segments for personalizing across all different channels. So we're going to start using some different tools to be able to broadcast that voice, that personalized voice, across multiple channels and keeping consistency there. And then the 4th session, the last session, is talking about unifying the data and really sort of elevating that data, putting that data to use across both online and offline channels using Acquia CDP technology as the core of our DXP. So let's get started. A lot of what I'm talking about today is actually going to be covered in our ebook. And I'm going to provide you a link at the end, a QR code that you can snap and download it yourself. And we'll also share a link to it as part of the follow-up that Rachel's going to do on here. It gives you a bit of a background on how to get started, the reasons why it's important, and just give you a little bit of hand-holding through that process that you can do yourselves or with your partners. So let's have a look at DX itself. I'm not going to spend too long on this because you've obviously been having conversations about digital experience for probably quite a few years now. You've probably been sitting at home listening to webinars about digital experience, how important it is nowadays. But I just wanted to set a bit of the context of what we're talking about today and some of the terminology that we use, just for consistency. So the DX a company delivers to its customers is highly dependent on the maturity of its digital channels in key areas, assessed from the customer's perspective, remember. So the first one we can look at is reachability. So that could be where you're looking at reaching across things like Google AdWords, across social media, or even reaching out on things like going across to offline channels or even trade shows and things like that if you're B2B. There's channel flexibility within there. So you might be going across different channels, but how reactive can you be to those? Can you suddenly spin up maybe a mobile app if you're doing a trade show? Or maybe you want to do some sales enablement on an iPad, or you might want to start reaching out across WeChat or Line. How flexible are you able to do that? And across those channels, you've got personalization. So can you, rather than just talk about using your own voice and what you think customers want to hear, are you actually providing them what they actually want to hear or what they need to hear themselves? And that's going to be different for all of your different types of customers and segments within there. We've got simplicity and ease of use. What's the point in having all of this if it's not easy to use for the customer? Why are you actually bringing on people and giving them these, and giving the tools to your marketing teams, etc., if it's not easy for your customers to use? Why are you putting these blockers up there? You've got things like purchase convenience. If you're providing a purchasing experience, are you actually giving them the chance to purchase as and when they want in the channel that they want. And then if you're providing a service after that, which you probably are, making sure that it's convenient to be able to service themselves or contact you on the channel that they want to contact you in the way they want to. So why aren't you doing all of these? And as we've seen very recently with all of the lockdowns and everything like that, more and more people are going digital, and people are seeing pretty bad experiences. A lot of companies are being forced into doing more and more digital. They're jumping feet first, and this may be the first time they're doing it, and they may not be doing it so well. And we're finding out that more and more companies are actually starting to fold. There's more and more layoffs and things like that. And it tends to be those companies that just have been looking after the online. They've been relying on the offline so much. They're jumping onto that online, maybe too late or not at all. And they're really starting to feel that pain with that. But why aren't we doing all of that? It makes sense, doesn't it? But if we aren't doing it, why aren't we doing it? And it all boils down to pain for the business. So yes, this is a dark image, but in fact, a lot of marketers, business stakeholders, etc., they're feeling quite dark when it comes to things like delivering a great customer experience or digital experience. There's a lot of pain these businesses are going through. So look at right now, many teams are being cut down. Some teams are even being pushed to a 4-day or 3-day week. So they're expected to do more with less resources. Think about some of these pains about technology. Someone's thrust a new technology upon them. They're not used to working in that way. They're suddenly told that they need to then expand and do some line integration and start messaging out online or WeChat when they've just been doing emails before. They're suddenly maybe having to look after the ad spend where an ad company was doing it for them before, and they're doing it with less resources. Lots and lots of pain they're going through. But it's not just the execution pain that are driving these. We've got to also think about senior stakeholder pain as well. They're looking at, okay, maybe they're looking at these reduced margins going forward. They're having to forecast. They're having to obviously hit their strategic objectives. They've got board members to be beholden to. They've got shareholders to be beholden to. So when we're looking at all of this pain in terms of execution, we've always got to think about what's driving the business. What keeps those stakeholders awake at night? Where's that hammer coming down upon them? So when we think about the frustrations on an execution side of things, we've got to also align them with with those stakeholder issues and problems. So if someone says, okay, we need to actually really look at going onto this new channel, we need to push onto WeChat or something like that. You've got to have a look at the business and say, actually, is that China market or the WeChat users, is that really an opportunity for us? Is it somewhere where we're putting our chips down onto it? Or is it going to be a waste of resources? So we've got to, when we're looking at our pain points, especially from an execution point of view, we need to also make sure they're aligned with those business pain points. So lots of pain. I've given you some dark images. I've given you frustration, stormy clouds, and everything. There's lots of pain that is driving this change, but still things aren't happening quick enough. Many businesses are not making these changes. Why is that? So I'm going to do a little bit of a flip now from those changes and give you a little dog, but this dog is looking scared, isn't it? So when we talk about these drivers and making changes to be able to deliver those great digital experiences, that word change comes up. And humans are resistant generally to change. Of course, we get shiny new toy syndrome. We maybe get some new technology to play with. A new channel is fun to play with for a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's about changing the way we're working. And we're not very good at that generally as a species. If someone comes along and thrusts a new piece of technology at us, yes, it could look great, but to use it in our everyday job, oh, that's a bit too much. What? I have to take on more channels. This is really taking away from what I'm doing. I have to do training. This training might have to be paid for. What? I might need more staff to do this. What do you mean I have to take on this sort of ad spend as well? I have more than enough to do. Where does this time and money come from? So there's a lot of fear to be able to, that comes into actually doing this. But I personally believe that the biggest challenge to business maturing in digital is from 3 letters. Those three letters are BAU. Business as usual can really be the biggest blocker in moving forward. Why do I think this? It's because business as usual is really all about looking at what you're doing now and what you've done in the past. If you're always looking at what you're doing now on a day-to-day and looking at the past, how can you move forward? So how many times have you heard, or actually how many times have I heard, I'm too busy doing my day job? And this really comes into play when you look at things like A/B testing, things like personalization. So things that actually don't take a huge amount of effort involved. Of course, there is some effort around there. There's strategic thinking and everything like that. But when you actually get down to it and actually include it in your business as usual, it's not a huge amount of work for the amount of returns that you get. So when I hear this, I'm too busy doing my day job, it's incredibly frustrating. So think of it in this way. So I'm not the greatest swimmer in the world. Yeah, I can swim. I've done diving before and things like that. But think of me swimming across a wide river. I want to get to the other side, but there's no boats anywhere and no bridges for miles. So I decide I'm gonna swim across. Now, because I'm not the greatest swimmer in the world, and this may be like half a mile across a big river. There's currents and things like that. I'm swimming across, I start to get tired. I start to get into trouble. Maybe there's a crocodile on the horizon or something like that, I don't know. But I'm starting to get into trouble. I'm floundering a bit, and just as luck would have it, a boat pulls up alongside and says, get on, I'll take you to the other side. Now my aim is absolutely to get to the other side. But I say to the boat driver, no, I'm not going to get on because I'm busy swimming. And if I stop and get on the boat, it's going to slow me down. Now, that's actually completely insane, isn't it? But that's exactly what we're doing when someone comes up to you and says, I'm too busy doing my day job to be able to do this. So to be able to get that sort of time and flexibility to be able to change and to be able to maybe stop and get on that boat, so to speak, you're going to need that key stakeholder and management buy-in. So it's important to look at those two sides of the business. So if we're looking at any sort of change, that pain is going to come from the execution side of things, but it also needs to solve a pain that's coming down from the top, from that senior manager and stakeholder side of things. So we need to make sure that those are aligned, because if there's going to be any change, and change does take some resources, it takes some time and effort, but to be able to do that, it needs to be business case. You need to get their buy-in. Now, because changes over maybe the past 10 years or so have been seen generally as additional work, or they're not strategic or KPI focused, businesses are rarely seeing that quick payback. So you're getting a lot of pushback, especially from traditional companies, where they may have flirted or tried with a little bit of this business or digital transformation, so to speak, and they've been burnt before. So trying to get that buy-in, especially from the pain from the business users, gets harder and harder because those senior managers have been burnt and they've not seen those quick paybacks that they like. Now, one business I worked with in the UK actually gamified their personalization and testing. This was really effective. At the end of each week, the business unit owner would come over and he would hold a little award ceremony, so to speak, and highlight and give a prize to the team or individual with the greatest ROI on their content pushes for that week. So he actually liked to wake up every day and have a look overnight and see what was happening in terms of uplifts and ROI on the campaigns that were being running from his teams. But this embedded that change into their business as usual, while allowing for visibility as to why that change needed to happen. They were aware of the benefits of it happening. So change is absolutely possible, but sometimes you need to be a little bit creative about how you bring that change in. It is absolutely possible. But at the beginning, you've got to look at where you are. You've got to appraise yourself. What are you currently doing about digital experience? Now, you could be an absolutely traditional company that does absolutely nothing online, and that's fair enough, but at least you're honest about it and you've painted that picture. But many companies, or virtually every company, is doing something with digital. So again, we look at those 6 areas of that digital experience we highlighted, things like the reachability. So you want to actually have a look at what you're doing in that area. And you can do some sort of map. So if we look on the right-hand side, we've got some sort of example of a map where you may want to highlight sort of the reachability area. And you may want to break that down into the areas that are relevant to your business. So if you're making a fashion label or something like that, or your retail, you probably want to do a push onto social media in some way. You might want to be doing things like the Google AdWords, keywords based on your products or the segments or categories that you're working on. So you might want to break down those that reachability category into some different areas, but then you want to highlight: are you doing this poorly? Are you doing moderately? Or, being honest, are you doing well in this area? And then you might want to break down these other areas such as the channel flexibility, service convenience, purchase convenience. The aim of this is to really look at mapping out what state you're in within there. Once you've got that map, and of course, be honest with this, you then to be able to start mapping out the difficulty in each of the areas that you've highlighted and the investment that might be required. And they can just be very high level at the moment, but this will get you a better idea of that investment that is required. And then you want to map the value to the business. And this is where you're going to really start joining in with that strategic approach and those KPIs, etc., and the shareholder problems that I talked about before. So you want to map these areas in terms of the value they're going to bring to the business. Now that could be a dollar value, which is much easier because when you start looking at dollars and cents, you actually is something that's easily translatable. But they could also be things like gaining market share or something like that. Now you want to make sure that they are aligning to those strategic objectives. Or if they're not, it's okay, put them down. They just may be deprioritized a bit. But once you have both that value and investment for the areas, it allows you to identify some of that low-hanging fruit and enables you to start on that digital maturity journey. So what you're doing here is actually a framework of a sort of plan where you can start getting going. Now, I talked about the low-hanging fruits, etc. It's easy to start taking those and start doing those on a one-off and ad hoc. But don't fall into that trap of looking at, okay, I've done this, and then do it as additional work, or take one person off a project. They're going to do this, and then once they've done that little bit of maybe personalization, a bit of testing, maybe a report in analytics, and then put them back onto their day job, so to speak. You want to make sure this becomes business as usual. So I've talked about that mapping, etc. Now, there tends to be a problem with this is that people are generally not honest when it comes down to talking about this. So when you're doing appraisals of where you currently stand, you need your teams to be honest. Now, whether it's from a business stakeholder point of view, quite often they are told that, yes, everything's great, we're doing X, Y, Z, just to keep the boss happy. Now, they could be thinking, yes, I'm doing great personalization, I'm doing X, I'm doing Y, I'm doing Z. But actually, from an execution point of view, they're papering over the cracks. So you want to make sure that who you're speaking to and whoever's putting this map together is actually getting an honest view of this. Actually have a look at the digital experience yourselves. Speak to different teams and actually bring people across different teams and actually start making use of that digital experience. Maybe make use of the call center yourselves if they're using digital and data to influence that, and see how that experience is going for yourselves. You need to be honest with this appraisal. Otherwise, if you say everything is great, 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 you're not going to get anywhere. But also, don't say you're not doing anything, because that doesn't really help either. You want to be honest and get that honest view of moving forward. So once you have that map and you've started to give that very high level of things like the value to the business, the kind of investment that you're looking at, it doesn't need to be down to the dollar and cents, just a very, very high gut feeling overview. You can always get your partners or someone with experience, just ask them a few questions and get ballpark figures around there. You can then start to look at how that maturity level starts moving forward. So that maturity map of currently where you are is going to give you an idea of where you sit within this model. And there's a very good chance it's going to sit within probably between level 1 and 2 somewhere. Now, either luckily or unluckily, you might be starting at that very first level. Maybe you've just got a website, you're doing offline service, no personalization. You might be doing some sales online, but it might be using a Shopify or something like that as its own separate channel. Your site might not be so mobile responsive. And at the end of the day, you might be seeing digital to complement other channels, which is traditionally what we've often seen with retail. As you start moving forward, you might start to say, okay, our next level might be start using more advanced digital channels. So we might start to integrate with Line or WeChat to start sending out a couple of push messages. We might start being reactive to online servicing. So instead of someone having to pick up the phone all of the time, you might start having some FAQs that has a little bit of personalization within there. So if someone comes on and you're in education, they're an existing student, then you might show them some existing student information when they look in the help area. If they're a new student that they haven't logged in, or it's the first time on the site or something, it goes to the help. You might want to say a bit about the campus, about how to get there, etc. So you're starting to be a bit reactive to online servicing. You're starting to have your online sales a bit more reactive on there. Your design is a bit more user-friendly across the channels. Actually, not a bit more. They should be user-friendly. And digital is an alternative channel. So you're starting now to see, you're still having silos, but you're seeing digital as an alternative, and it's an equivalent channel to what you had online. You then start to bring in, okay, and your channels maybe start expanding. You're having end-to-end customer services. You're having more fulfillment online. You have consultative sales. So sales are actually benefiting from digital as well, both online and offline. Segmentation, personalization, and your design is taking to the next level. And digital is basically becoming the platform of choice. And actually your offline channels are starting to now complement digital. And then you start getting to that almost utopia where you're actually driving those channel preferences. You're being proactive sales. You've got a humanified design, and you've got that sort of omni-channel experience where it should be seamless, jumping backwards and forwards. Obviously, when you're talking about a maturity, as they say, things like Rome wasn't built in a day. When you're born, you're not immediately an adult. You've got the crawl before you can run type scenarios. All of these sayings are there for a reason. It's you've got to start somewhere. Now, this journey I talked about is an example. Each of your paths may be different. You may be having a very data-driven business, and therefore you might be bringing that data more to the forefront. But always when you're looking at moving up on this digital maturity, you think about those KPIs, those strategic objectives, etc. Because when you start moving up, each of those the steps that you're taking, they do take time. They take investment. They take resources. At the end of the day, time and resources equals revenue and money. So you want to make sure that each of these investments you make are tied to strategic objectives. And always review those strategic objectives because, as you know, things happen, times change, and you want to make sure you're always in alignment with those. So this all boils down to communication is key. You've got to have great communication between that execution and the stakeholders. You've got to have great communication with your partners who may be implementing some of this, with your vendors, such as Acquia. They need to understand what those aims are, where those pain points are. So when you're going through this journey, you're mapping out those pain points I talked about. You're mapping out with a very honest appraisal of how you're doing currently on that digital experience. Don't be afraid to share those with your vendor, with your partner, and with other stakeholders around the business. And always look at updating those because that's really going to help you move along, show where you were, and start benchmarking. Because at the end of the day, if you're going to invest, you're going to have to prove some sort of ROI. So if you have a benchmark of where you were, and maybe some of your analytics can come into play there, you want to have a benchmark to say, look, we're moving up this journey, and this is why we are doing it. So if you're documenting stuff, keep it. Always update it. Have a look at where you were, and as you start moving up, you want to prove the benefits that you're giving. If something is not working, learn from it, but it's okay. We talk about failing, but you've got to fail fast. You can't go on this maturity journey, start building a data lake or data warehouse or something like that, and then after a few years it go wrong. You've got to learn about what you're doing and always keep it in alignment with the business. And I'm a very firm believer in taking small areas and making these smaller jumps rather than a huge project moving forward. They may wrap up into a larger project, but you've got to start somewhere and get people used to these processes that you're bringing them into. So one area I wanted to go a little bit deeper in today is this build versus buy concept. As you start building out that map, and as you start building out those different areas of digital experience where you may be hot or not, so to speak, you might start to get a picture of, okay, I might need some technology here. I might need some work here. I might need some different resources in XYZ area to be able to enable this moving forward. And when you start looking at the technology side, you may be tempted to think, okay, I've got quite a certain scenario here. I may have to build everything myself because I've got these particular requirements. Or you may come out from the point of view is like, okay, I need to send emails. So I'm just going to buy a box standard email platform that sends emails out. So looking at those areas that you're looking at, you're going to look at, okay, am I going to look into more into the build, more bespoke stuff, build upon a platform? Or am I going to buy something that's a little bit more turnkey, something that's a bit more out of the box that I can build on for the future and then configure? And an example I wanted to bring up here was a study by Gartner that's saying many organizations are spending up to 4 years trying to unify customer data themselves without ever nearing satisfaction. And this is what I talked about moving forward, is that you get many companies that are trying to jump feet first. They're trying to go too high up that maturity ladder, almost too fast, almost losing sight of those strategic objectives or looking too far ahead of those strategic objectives. And then a project is lasting like 4 years. And by the end of it, it's either become irrelevant, it's become technology has overtaken or something like that. Something's come along and almost done the job that you've invested 4 years and huge amounts of resources in. And the time to value is lost. So you want to really look at that build versus buy, and you start to get a better idea of those requirements because you've thought about what you wanted to do moving forward. And here's one proof point that we have. So this is a company in the UK called Wix. And think of them, they're pretty much the equivalent in the US of Home Depot or Bunnings in Australia. And they do things like hardware, drills, they might have bathroom accessories, DIY, garden equipment and stuff like that. So it's a consumer or a small businessman can go in and you tend to be able to buy everything to do DIY or building materials. And they had a problem is that they were able to execute across different channels. They were sending emails and things. They were updating websites. They had CRM, customer service, etc. But be able to execute on these channels was taking a long time. It was taking too long for them. They were being very reactive to things, but by the time they reacted, either the moment was past, or it became irrelevant, or they were just too slow to be able to do stuff. So looking at things like pulling a customer list for direct mail, that was taking 2 weeks before they employed the Acquia CDP to bring their data together. And then with that, it was taking just 10 minutes, as it should. If you want to be able to identify, I want to speak to this particular type of customer, it should not take 2 weeks to get that data. It should be a very quick thing that the marketing teams should be able to do themselves. They wanted to execute a Facebook campaign. It was taking them 3 weeks to gather all of the data and the tools together. But with the Acquia CDP, down to 30 minutes to be able to do that, and then so on. So in terms of that digital maturity, they were already doing bits and pieces here, but they needed to take a next step and start to plug data in together. And the benefits were absolutely empowering for doing that. So I'm going to finish up now before we go into our Q&A session and just provide a few key takeaways here. The first one I want to bring up is really absolutely aligning that business user maturity with that senior management pain. If you can alleviate that pain and prove that actually by bringing that maturity, by investing some of that time, remember I talked about jumping on the boat, so to speak, instead of trying to swim across yourself, is that if you can get the resources to be able to give you that little bit of time and then adjust into the new business as usual, moving forward, if you can prove that to the senior management and alleviate some of their pain, whether it's revenue, market share, helping with X, Y, Z, you're going to get that buy-in. So always business case what you are doing. That will infinitely help you get that investment to move up that business user maturity in terms of execution to provide that digital experience that's required. Don't get fixated on that existing business as usual. You should never ever want to hear or never speak yourself if you're a business user is, I'm too busy doing my day job. Your day job is actually what you need to be doing moving forward. Tomorrow is not always another day. Tomorrow should be what you're thinking about, what you're doing. Of course, you need to be able to be doing your job, but you also be able to be flexible enough to move forward. And then lastly, you've got to be honest about your current digital experience appraisal. You want to make sure that people are not protecting their own fiefdoms. They're not protecting their own kingdom by saying everything is okay and papering over the cracks. Make sure that everyone is honest moving forward. People aren't about to lose their jobs because someone is doing something, but you want to make sure that you're enabling people to do their jobs better. And we're going to, especially in the next few sessions, we're going to be talking more about the technology that, that helps this. And we're talking about technology as an enabler. It's helping business processes, helping people. So it's no good. It's not helping everyone if you just paper over the cracks and say everything is okay. When we talk about personalization, personalization doesn't just mean putting someone's email or name within an email. It's actually talking to them as an individual. So just move this out of the way. So please make sure that you're honest moving forward and that your teams are honest. Explain to them that they're not going to get fired, hopefully, if they are honest, but this is actually going to help them moving forward. Always think about them, and the outcome should be that great digital experience for the customers. It should be a win-win scenario. So I'm going to finish up just as that quick summary on our webinars. So the next one, we're going to talk around looking more into the content management and that voice that you're putting forward. Many times we talk about the voice that people are putting forward on their websites. It comes from a corporate voice. It comes from your own, what you think the customers want to hear. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. What you need to be doing is allowing the flexibility with the content and your content owners, content managers and editors to be able to provide a variations of content for what the customer feels they need to hear or they want to hear. Next, we'll be talking about, okay, there's going to be different segments within here. We might want to do those across some different channels across. So we're starting to elevate that, that content management and that voice across different channels. We're going to be looking at different segments and conversions and how we can improve across there, maybe speaking as the one-to-one in terms of marketing automation. And then finally, I'm going to talk around the heart of the Acquia Digital Experience Platform, which is a CDP offering, and how that CDP is going to start bringing that data together in terms of that maturity and really, I'd like to say, give a steroid boost to everything we were talking about before, and how that CDP can unify that MarTech. I don't want to say help break down silos, because I believe that will, due to human nature, will almost never happen, but moving forward in terms of helping silos help each other and learn from each other and getting wins all across the business. So I hope you can sign up for those. There'll be links within those with the emails that Rachel's going to follow up with, and we look forward to seeing you on there. And I want to finish off actually providing a link this time. I didn't want you to get distracted before. Use a QR code. Use this link now if you want to go and download, have some bedtime reading. But it gives you an overview of what we're talking about with the digital experience model. And we will provide a link with that, with what Rachel was talking about. So I'm going to open up to any Q&A. I think I've been talking a lot myself. I think there's a couple of things in here. Let me see, I've got one question. How actually DXP and campaign management platforms work with each other? That's a great question. Quite often we see the MarTech landscape, and I think we've all seen the slides or screenshots of that. I can't remember the publisher that puts it out now, but it's basically a whole mess of thousands of different MarTech platforms. And they could be marketing automation, campaign management, CMS. There are thousands of different platforms. what we want to talk about here, and what I'm going to cover in the next sessions, is how they start to work together. And especially when we come down to the CDP, the Customer Data Platform, this is really the key, that secret sauce in not just bringing those platforms together, the campaign management tools, personalization, CMS, but it also brings them together with intelligence, things like identity resolution, understanding the customers, machine model, artificial intelligence, things like that. So when we're talking about bringing those and how they work together, I'm going to go into those a little bit more detail in the next sessions. So any more questions before I give you a few minutes more time back to your session? I'll keep it open for a bit. Thank you. Okay, I'll head over back to Rachel for our closing up.
All right. So if anyone has any more questions, please submit them in the chat window or the Q&A tab that you can see in the window. So, all right. So thank you all for attending. The slides and a recording of this webinar will be posted on our website. And also you'll be sent to you via email within the next 48 hours. So be sure to look out for that. So thank you, Tony. Thank you everyone for attending. You guys have a good day.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye.